The envelope hits the mahogany desk with a sound that seems too loud for paper. Inside, 3 photographs slide out like accusations. A young man, maybe 23, 24, slumped against a subway wall with a cardboard sign. The same face washing dishes through a steamed kitchen window. That face again in line at a homeless shelter, eyes down, shoulders caved in like he's trying to disappear. And the billionaire staring at these images recognizes those eyes because they're his daughter's eyes, the daughter he buried 15 years ago. This is her son, the grandson he's been paying $50,000 a month to protect. The child who was supposed to be living in private schools and safe homes and everything money could buy. Except he's here, on these photographs, sleeping on the streets of a city his grandfather owns half of. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what this billionaire discovered about where his money actually went will leave you absolutely stunned, trust me. You'll want to be part of this community when the truth comes out. His hand shakes as he picks up the phone. The private investigator on the other end doesn't wait for hello. I found him 3 days ago, took me 6 months, but I found him. You need to see this yourself. Tonight. Before you make any calls, before you do anything, you need to see what happened to your money. What happened to your grandson. And just like that, the world a 70-year-old billionaire built on certainty and control crumbles into a single terrible question. If he's been paying for 15 years, where did the money go? More importantly, where did the boy go? But to understand how we got here, you have to go back to the day the billionaire lost everything that mattered. 15 years earlier, his daughter and her husband died in a crash on a rain-slick highway. Their 7-year-old son survived with nothing but a fractured arm and a shattered sense of safety. And the billionaire who'd built empires and crushed competitors and never once flinched at a bad deal found himself unable to function. Grief didn't just wound him. It paralyzed him. He couldn't look at the boy without seeing his daughter's face, couldn't hear the child's voice without remembering hers. So when his late daughter's aunt, a woman named Margaret, offered to take the boy in, he said yes. Not because it was right, because it was easier. Margaret was calm, composed, the kind of person who seemed to have answers when everyone else had questions. She told him the boy needed stability, routine, a place where he wasn't constantly reminded of what he'd lost. She told him visits would confuse the child, that it was better to let him adjust, to give him space to heal. And the billionaire, drowning in guilt and grief, believed her. More than that, he paid her. $50,000 a month wired like clockwork. Tuition, housing, therapy, clothes, everything a child could need and more. He told himself he was doing the right thing. Told himself that money could replace presence, that providing was the same as protecting. Years passed in a blur of wire transfers and vague updates. Margaret sent letters, short and reassuring. The boy is adjusting well. He's doing fine in school. He's not ready for visits yet, but soon. Maybe next year. The photographs she sent were always distant, blurred, the boy's face turned away or obscured by shadows. When the billionaire asked to visit for birthdays or holidays, Margaret always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. The boy wasn't ready. He was going through a phase. It would set back his progress. And the billionaire, who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, accepted every excuse. Because deep down, he was afraid. Afraid that if he saw the boy, he'd fall apart again. Afraid that his grandson would look at him and see abandonment instead of love. So he kept sending money. Kept telling himself that as long as the payments went through, the boy was safe. That Margaret was doing what he couldn't. That one day, when the grief wasn't so sharp, when the boy was older, they'd reconnect. There'd be time. There was always supposed to be time. But time, as it turns out, doesn't wait for grief to heal. And money, no matter how much of it you send, can't protect someone from the person you trusted to keep them safe. The anonymous email arrived on a Tuesday. No subject line, no signature, just a single sentence. Your grandson isn't where you think he is. Attached was a photograph, grainy and poorly lit, of a young man who looked like a ghost of his daughter standing outside a pawn shop in a neighborhood the billionaire only knew from crime statistics. He stared at that image for 20 minutes, his mind cycling between denial and dread. It couldn't be real. Margaret would have told him if something was wrong, wouldn't she? But the longer he looked, the more he recognized the shape of the boy's face, the slant of his shoulders, the way he held himself like someone who'd learned not to take up too much space. He hired the investigator that same day, a woman with a reputation for finding things people wanted to stay hidden. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You want the truth or you want to feel better?" she asked. He told her he wanted to know where his grandson was. She told him to prepare himself because the truth doesn't usually come with a bow. 3 weeks later, she called with the first update. Margaret's financials showed luxury cars, designer purchases, vacation homes in 3 countries. But there were no school records for the boy after age 10. No medical visits, no therapy bills, no evidence that a single dollar of the money sent for his care had actually been used on him. The investigator tracked down neighbors, former staff members, people who remembered a child who wasn't allowed outside, who was kept in a back room, who disappeared from sight entirely when he was still too young to have a choice. One neighbor recalled something that made the billionaire's blood run cold. "I asked her once about the boy, hadn't seen him in months. She just smiled and said he was fine, that he preferred to stay inside. But I heard him sometimes late at night crying through the walls. When I suggested maybe he needed friends, needed to go to school like normal kids, she looked at me like I'd insulted her. Said he was getting everything he needed, that his grandfather was paying for the best care money could buy. And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. When she found him, it was in a part of the city where hope went to die quietly. He was working the overnight shift at a 24-hour laundromat, folding towels for minimum wage, living in a single room above a convenience store that smelled like mold and old cigarettes. The investigator watched him for 3 days before reporting back. Watched him walk to work in shoes held together with duct tape. Watched him eat 1 meal a day from a food truck, counting out exact change. Watched him return to that tiny room where the only furniture was a mattress on the floor and a broken lamp. This was the child who was supposed to have everything. This was the grandson a billionaire had spent millions to protect, and he'd been discarded like trash the moment he turned 18 and stopped being useful. The investigator's final report included something else. Bank records showing that when the boy turned 18, Margaret stopped accepting the monthly payments. Just stopped. No explanation, no forwarding address for the boy, nothing. She'd simply told the billionaire's accountant that the child was now an adult and no longer needed support, that he was doing well, starting his own life, wanted independence, and the billionaire, still operating under the assumption that his grandson was thriving, had respected that supposed wish. He'd even felt proud that the boy he'd never met was becoming a man who didn't need handouts, except the boy hadn't wanted independence. He'd been thrown out, given $200 and a garbage bag of clothes and told to figure it out. And he had no idea that somewhere in a penthouse across the city, his grandfather had been sending money for his entire childhood, had been asking to visit for years, had been lied to just as completely as he had. The billionaire stands now in his office holding those 3 photographs and understands something that no amount of money can fix. He didn't just lose 15 years, his grandson did. And the person he trusted to bridge that gap had turned it into a chasm lined with lies. He's about to meet the boy for the first time since the funeral. A boy who doesn't know him, who has every reason to hate him, who's been told God knows what about why his grandfather never came. And the billionaire has no idea what he's going to say. How do you apologize for a betrayal you didn't know you were committing? How do you explain that you were trying to protect someone by staying away, when staying away was exactly what destroyed them? But here's the question that should keep you up at night, the one that makes this story bigger than one family's tragedy. How many people are living in the wreckage of good intentions? How many children have been abandoned by the very systems and people who promised to save them? And if someone with unlimited resources couldn't protect the person he loved most, what does that say about the ones who don't have billions to throw at the problem? The billionaire is about to walk into that laundromat at 2 in the morning and confront the cost of his grief. But before he does, you need to understand something. This isn't a story about money. It never was. It's about what happens when the people we trust with our most precious responsibilities decide those responsibilities are worth less than their own comfort, and what it takes to rebuild something after it's been shattered beyond recognition. So what happens when a man who's been lied to for 15 years finally comes face to face with the truth? And more importantly, what happens when the grandson he abandoned learns that abandonment wasn't the plan, just the result? That answer is coming. But first, you need to hear what the investigator found in Margaret's files, because the money wasn't the worst thing she stole. What Margaret stole wasn't just money. It was something far more valuable, something that once taken can never be fully returned. And the billionaire was about to discover exactly how deep the betrayal went. The laundromat sits on a corner where the streetlights flicker more than they shine, where the smell of detergent can't quite mask the scent of urban decay. It's 2:17 in the morning when the billionaire's car pulls up to the curb, and through the grimy windows he can see a figure moving between rows of industrial washing machines. The investigator offered to come with him to facilitate this meeting, to somehow make it easier. But how do you make easy what should never have been hard in the first place? How do you introduce yourself to your own blood when you're supposed to be a stranger? He sits in the car for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of watching his grandson fold towels with the mechanical precision of someone who's learned that thinking makes the hours go slower. 11 minutes of gathering courage he's never needed before. Not in boardrooms or negotiations or hostile takeovers. Because this isn't business. This is the reckoning for every choice he made when grief was louder than responsibility. The bell above the door chimes when he enters. The grandson doesn't look up immediately, just calls out without turning. "We're open, but the dryers on the left side are down. Should be fixed by morning." His voice is flat, practiced. The tone of someone who said the same thing 1,000 times to people who don't really care. "I'm not here for the laundry," the billionaire says, and his voice cracks on the last word. Now the boy looks up. And for a moment, for just a fraction of a second, the billionaire sees his daughter so clearly it physically hurts. Same eyes, same slight tilt of the head when confused, same way of pressing his lips together before speaking. But where his daughter's eyes had been bright, curious, alive, this young man's eyes are guarded, tired, suspicious in a way that speaks to years of learning that strangers rarely bring good news. "We close at 6 a.m. If you need something washed, you can come back then," the grandson says, turning back to his folding. "I need to talk to you. Your name is Daniel, isn't it?" The boy's hand's still on a towel. "Who's asking?" And here it is. The moment that will define everything that comes after. The billionaire takes a breath that feels like it contains all 15 years of absence. "I'm your grandfather." The towel drops to the floor. Daniel doesn't pick it up. He just stares, and the billionaire watches confusion shift to recognition, shift to something that looks uncomfortably like anger. "I don't have a grandfather." "You do? You always did." The word comes out bitter, sharp-edged. "Then where the hell were you?" It's the question the billionaire has been asking himself since he saw those photographs, but hearing it out loud, hearing it in his own daughter's voice coming from his grandson's mouth, makes it cut deeper. "It's complicated. I've got time." Daniel crosses his arms. "My shift doesn't end for 4 more hours, and you're the only person here, so go ahead. Explain complicated." But here's what makes this moment so devastating. The billionaire came prepared to explain his absence, to justify his choices, to make Daniel understand why he stayed away. What he wasn't prepared for was the look in his grandson's eyes, because it wasn't confusion or curiosity. It was the flat, dead certainty of someone who'd already decided exactly why his grandfather never came. And the truth would have to fight against 15 years of lies that had hardened into gospel. The billionaire reaches into his jacket and pulls out his phone, pulls up the first bank transfer. $50,000 dated 3 weeks after the funeral. He scrolls. Another. 15 years of them, one every month, never late, never missed. He holds the screen out. I paid for your care for 15 years, 50,000 a month. Daniel glances at the phone, then back at his grandfather's face. Paid who? Your aunt, Margaret. She said you needed stability, that visits would confuse you, that you needed space to heal. She sent updates, told me you were doing well, that you weren't ready to see me yet. The words sound pathetic even as he says them, justifications for unjustifiable absence. Margaret. Daniel laughs, but there's no humor in it, just a sound like glass breaking. Margaret told you I wasn't ready to see you? She told me you were dead. The words land like a physical blow. Said you died a year after my parents, heart attack. Too much grief. That's what she told me when I was 8 years old and asked why you never visited. That you loved my mom so much that losing her killed you too. The billionaire feels the floor shift beneath him. What? Later, when I got older and started asking more questions, the story changed. Suddenly you weren't dead. You just didn't want me. Said I reminded you too much of what you'd lost. That you'd paid her to take me so you wouldn't have to look at me. That the money she got was basically a payment to keep me out of your life. Daniel's voice is steady, controlled, but his hands are shaking. So which version am I supposed to believe? That you thought I was being taken care of, or that you paid someone to make me disappear? And there it is. The real theft. Margaret didn't just steal money. She stole reality itself, replacing it with a carefully constructed lie that poisoned every possible relationship before it could begin. The question isn't just what happened to the money anymore. It's how do you prove the truth to someone who's been trained to believe you're the villain of their story? The billionaire's phone is still in his hand, still showing those transfers. 15 years of proof, that means nothing against a lifetime of lies. I can show you the messages, the emails. I begged her to let me visit for years. Every birthday, every holiday, I asked. She always had a reason why it wasn't the right time. Show me. And so he does. Pulls up emails from 13 years ago. 12, 11. A chain of desperate messages that all say the same thing in different ways. Please let me see him. Please tell me how he is. Please let me be part of his life. And Margaret's response is always calm, always reassuring, always putting it off. He's adjusting well. He's not ready yet. Maybe next summer. Maybe next year. Let's give him more time. Daniel reads them on the small phone screen, scrolling through years of correspondence he never knew existed. The billionaire watches his grandson's face, watches the certainty start to crack, watches confusion seep through the gaps. Why didn't you just show up? You're rich, right? You could have just come anyway. It's a fair question. Maybe the only fair question. Because I was a coward. Because grief made me weak and she used that weakness. Because every time she said you weren't ready, part of me was relieved. Because looking at you meant confronting what I'd lost and I wasn't strong enough to do it. The words come out raw, unpolished, true. I told myself I was respecting your space. That the money meant I was still taking care of you. That one day when you were older, when the grief wasn't so sharp, we'd reconnect. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be lies I used to justify being afraid. The silence stretches between them, broken only by the industrial hum of washing machines. Finally, Daniel speaks, and his voice is quieter now. Younger. She kept me in a room. Did you know that? The back bedroom in her house. Said I was too troubled to be around other people. That I needed quiet and structure and routine. I wasn't allowed to go to school after I was 10. She said I was being homeschooled, but mostly I just sat in that room and read whatever books she'd bring me. Old textbooks, nothing current. When I asked about friends, she said I wasn't ready for socialization. When I asked about going outside, she said the world was too dangerous for a boy as fragile as me. The billionaire's hands clench. I didn't know. God, I didn't know. When I turned 18, she came into my room and told me I was an adult now, that I needed to figure out my own life. She gave me $200 in a garbage bag with some clothes and drove me to a homeless shelter. Said she'd done her duty, that she'd raised me as a favor to my mother's memory, and now it was time for me to make my own way. I thought that was normal. I thought that's what happened when you became an adult. Because I'd never seen anything else. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it means to spend your entire childhood locked away from the world, told that isolation is protection, that loneliness is structure, that the silence of captivity is the same thing as safety. And then to be thrown into that world with no preparation, no skills, no understanding of how anything works. That's not neglect. That's calculated cruelty. And the question is why? The investigator had found part of that answer in Margaret's personal files, accessed through means the billionaire decided he didn't need to know about. What she found was a woman consumed by a bitterness that had festered for decades. Margaret had always been compared to her niece, the billionaire's daughter, the successful one, the beloved one, the one who got everything while Margaret got the scraps. When the daughter died and Margaret was given custody of the child, it wasn't an opportunity to honor her niece's memory. It was revenge. Every dollar sent for the boy's care went into Margaret's pocket. The luxury cars, the vacation homes, the designer clothes and international trips, all funded by money meant for a child who was eating donated food and wearing clothes from thrift stores. But the money was just the practical theft. The real crime was the psychological one. Margaret didn't just neglect Daniel. She systematically destroyed his sense of worth, his connection to family, his understanding of his own story. She told him his grandfather was dead, then told him his grandfather abandoned him, creating a narrative where he was fundamentally unwanted by the only family he had left. And when he was old enough to start asking harder questions, old enough to potentially expose the truth, she cut him loose, threw him away like he was garbage because to her that's what he'd always been. Not a child to be protected, just a paycheck that came with the inconvenience of having to occasionally pretend to care. The billionaire tells Daniel all of this, shows him the bank records the investigator uncovered, the properties purchased with his trust fund, the evidence of a life lived in luxury while he lived in a room. And with every piece of evidence, he watches his grandson's understanding of his own history collapse and rebuild itself into something closer to the truth. She bought a house in Tuscany, Daniel says, reading through the documents. With my money. She bought a house in Italy while I was eating canned soup in a room with no windows. Yes, and you didn't know. I didn't know, but I should have checked, should have insisted on seeing you, should have questioned why she was so adamant about keeping us apart. The billionaire's voice breaks. I should have fought harder. But here's the question that changes everything. What do you do with this information? How do you process learning that your entire childhood was a lie, that the abandonment you internalized wasn't real, that the person who was supposed to care for you saw you as nothing more than a revenue stream? And maybe more importantly, how do you trust anyone again when the person who destroyed you did it while smiling and cashing checks meant for your protection? Daniel sets the phone down on the folding table. Why are you here now? Why not a year ago? 5 years ago? 10? Because I didn't know you needed me until a week ago. That's not an answer. No, the billionaire admits. It's an excuse. The truth is I should have known, should have questioned, should have trusted my instincts instead of my grief. I failed you, and no amount of explanation will change that. But I'm here now because I want to try to fix what's been broken, if you'll let me. Fix it how? You can't give me back my childhood, can't undo 15 years of thinking I was worthless. No, but I can make sure Margaret answers for what she did. And I can try to give you what you should have had from the beginning. Family, support, truth. Daniel looks at him, really looks at him for the first time since he walked in. You look like her, my mom. Around the eyes. You look like her too. It's like looking at a ghost sometimes. Is that why you stayed away? Partially, but it was a cowardly reason. A washing machine buzzes, signaling the end of a cycle. Neither of them moves. Finally, Daniel speaks. I don't know if I can trust you. I know, and I don't know if I want to. I understand, but I want to know what happened, want to hear her try to explain it. And that's when the billionaire makes a decision that will change everything, because confronting Margaret won't be enough. Hearing her lies won't bring closure. What Daniel needs, what they both need, is for her to face consequences. Real ones. The kind that money can't buy your way out of. The kind that make the truth undeniable. Then that's what we'll do, the billionaire says, but first I need to show you something else. He pulls up a video on his phone, something the investigator sent him just this morning. Security footage from Margaret's house from 8 years ago. Recovered from a storage company she'd forgotten to pay after moving overseas. The footage shows a door, closed, with a small figure visible through the crack underneath. Just the shadow of feet, standing there, for hours. And Margaret walking past again and again, never opening it. Never checking. Just walking past like the child behind that door didn't exist. Daniel watches without speaking. Watches his own ghost stand at that door waiting for someone to let him out. Waiting for someone to care enough to turn the handle. When the video ends, his voice is steady. I want her to see this. Want her to explain how this was care. How this was what you were paying for. Then we confront her, together, and we don't let her walk away from the truth. Because some debts can't be paid in money. Some thefts require a different kind of restitution. And Margaret Hall is about to learn that the child she treated as disposable has grown into someone who refuses to be erased. But the confrontation won't just be about the past. It's about every child who's been made invisible by the people meant to protect them. Every trust that's been weaponized, every vulnerability that's been exploited. This isn't just Daniel's story anymore. It's a mirror showing us how easily cruelty disguises itself as care when no one's watching, when no one asks the hard questions, when money replaces presence and everyone assumes everything must be fine. The billionaire and his grandson leave the laundromat together as dawn starts breaking over the city. They're not family yet, not really. Trust doesn't rebuild in a single conversation, but there's something. A start, an agreement, a shared purpose. And sometimes that's enough to begin healing what should never have been broken. But first, they have to face the woman who broke it. The woman who's been living in luxury on stolen money and stolen innocence. The woman who turned a child's grief into her personal fortune. Margaret Hall has no idea they're coming. Has no idea that the lies she's maintained for 15 years are about to collapse. Has no idea that the child she discarded is about to force her to face exactly what she did. And when they arrive at her door, when they confront her with the evidence of her betrayal, when she tries to justify or explain or diminish what she's done, the real question will be, how does someone defend the indefensible? How do you explain stealing childhood itself? The answer is coming, and it's uglier than you can imagine. The question isn't whether Margaret will admit what she did. The question is whether any confession, any consequence, any form of justice can ever truly restore what was stolen. But they're about to find out. Margaret's house sits on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all glass and white stone and architectural arrogance. It's the kind of place that screams wealth without ever having to whisper it. The billionaire and his grandson stand at the door at 8 in the morning, and through the windows they can see her moving through the kitchen, pouring coffee from a machine that costs more than Daniel paid in rent for an entire year. She's wearing silk, her hair perfectly styled, looking like someone who sleeps well at night because conscience has never been a burden she's chosen to carry. The doorbell echoes through the house. Margaret appears in the entrance, and the moment she sees them together, her face does something interesting. It doesn't register shock or fear or guilt. It registers irritation, like they're salespeople interrupting her morning routine. "Richard," she says, not even looking at Daniel. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" The billionaire's voice is calm, controlled, dangerous in its quietness. "Because I think you've been expecting this for 15 years, just hoping it would never come." Now she looks at Daniel, really looks at him, and something flickers across her face. Not remorse. Recognition that her carefully constructed world is about to collapse. "I don't know what you've been told, but I think you should hear my side before you make any judgments." "Your side." Daniel speaks for the first time, and his voice carries a steadiness that surprises even him. You mean the side where you told me my grandfather was dead? Or the side where you said he abandoned me? Which version of your side should we hear first? Margaret's expression hardens. I did what was best for you. You were a traumatized child who needed structure and stability, not to be paraded around by a man who couldn't even look at you without falling apart. Structure. The billionaire pulls out his phone, pulls up the security footage, holds it out. Is that what you call locking a child in a room for hours, days? Is that the structure I was paying $50,000 a month to provide? She glances at the screen, and for just a moment something like panic crosses her face before she smooths it away. You have no idea what it was like raising a child that damaged. He needed boundaries, needed to understand that the world doesn't revolve around him. I was 10 years old, Daniel says. And now his voice shakes, not with weakness, but with the kind of anger that comes from years of swallowed words finally finding their way out. I was a child who'd lost his parents, and you treated me like I was a burden you had to tolerate. No, worse than that. You treated me like I was a paycheck with an inconvenient heartbeat attached. I gave you a home. You gave me a prison. Daniel steps closer. And you did it while spending money meant for my education, my health care, my future. Money my grandfather sent every single month believing I was being cared for. Where did it go, Margaret? The millions? Because it sure as hell wasn't spent on me. And this is the moment when people who commit cruelty always make the same mistake. They try to justify it, try to make you understand that they had reasons, that circumstances forced their hand, that somehow their victims are partially responsible for their own suffering. But justification is just cruelty wearing a mask of logic. Margaret's face twists into something ugly. You want to know the truth? Fine. Emma was always the golden child, always the favorite, always got everything while I got nothing but comparisons and disappointment. Your grandfather loved her more than he ever loved anyone, including his own wife. And then she died and left me with you, this living reminder of everything I could never be. So yes, I took the money, yes, I kept you away from him. Because why should I have to suffer through raising someone else's child while getting nothing in return? Why should you get the love and attention she always got when I'm the one who actually had to deal with you? The confession hangs in the air like poison, not because it's shocking, but because it confirms what they already knew. That Daniel's childhood wasn't stolen through negligence or circumstance. It was stolen through calculated, vindictive cruelty born from decades of jealousy that found its target in a grieving 7-year-old child. The billionaire's voice when he speaks is colder than Margaret has ever heard it. You destroyed a child because you were jealous of his dead mother, and you did it with money I sent to protect him. That's not just theft, Margaret, that's something far worse. And you're going to answer for every single day of it. You can't prove anything. Actually, Daniel says, pulling out his own phone, we can, because you're being recorded right now. Every word, every admission, and the police are standing outside listening to every syllable. He nods toward the window, where 2 officers are visible on the driveway, waiting. You just confessed to fraud, embezzlement, and child abuse on tape. So the question isn't whether we can prove it, the question is how many years you're going to spend in prison thinking about what you did. And that's when you see it. The moment someone realizes that the lies they've maintained, the cruelty they've justified, the comfort they've stolen has finally caught up with them. That there's no talking their way out, no manipulation that will work, no amount of deflection that will change what's about to happen. Margaret's face goes pale, then red, then collapses into something that looks almost like fear. The police come in. There are handcuffs and rights being read, and Margaret screaming about lawyers and mistakes and how they can't do this. But they can, and they are. And as she's walked out of the house she bought with stolen money, wearing silk pajamas purchased with stolen innocence, the billionaire and his grandson stand together and watch justice begin its slow, necessary work. The trial takes 6 months. 6 months of depositions and evidence and testimonies from neighbors who remembered a child who was never allowed outside, from accountants who traced every stolen dollar, from psychologists who explained what that kind of isolation does to a developing mind. Margaret's lawyers try everything. They claim she was overwhelmed, that she did her best under difficult circumstances, that the billionaire should have checked on his grandson if he really cared. But the evidence is overwhelming, and the recorded confession eliminates any possible defense. She's sentenced to 12 years for fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment. Her assets are seized, liquidated, returned. The house on the cliff, the cars, the vacation properties, all of it sold to pay restitution. But here's what Daniel learns during those 6 months. Justice and healing aren't the same thing. Watching Margaret face consequences doesn't undo the years of isolation, doesn't restore the childhood he lost, doesn't automatically make him trust the grandfather who's trying so hard to make up for lost time. Healing, it turns out, is harder than justice, slower, less satisfying in the moment but more necessary in the long run. The billionaire doesn't try to rush it, doesn't try to buy his way into Daniel's trust with money or gifts or grand gestures. He shows up, consistently, quietly, takes Daniel to therapy appointments and waits in the car, pays for education but doesn't pressure him about what to study, offers a place to stay but doesn't make it a condition of their relationship. And slowly, over months and then years, something begins to grow between them. Not the relationship they should have had because that's gone forever, but something new, something built on choice rather than obligation, on truth rather than lies. Daniel enrolls in community college, then transfers to university. Studies social work because he understands what it means to be invisible, to be failed by the systems meant to protect you. The billionaire attends every graduation, every milestone, never missing, never absent, making up for 15 years of forced distance with quiet, steady presence. And they talk. About Emma, about grief, about the ways love can be twisted into something harmful when it's filtered through pain. They don't always agree. Some days are harder than others, but they're present, and that presence matters more than perfection. 5 years after that meeting in the laundromat, Daniel opens the Emma Sterling Foundation. It's a nonprofit providing housing, education, and advocacy for neglected and displaced youth, kids who fell through cracks that should never exist. The opening ceremony is held at the laundromat where his grandfather first found him. It's been renovated, transformed into a community center with resources and programs and people who actually care. Daniel stands at the podium and his voice is stronger now, steadier, carrying the weight of someone who survived and decided that survival wasn't enough, that other people deserved better than he got. I was invisible for a long time, he says to the crowd gathered, not because I didn't exist, but because the person responsible for seeing me chose not to look. But someone finally did. Someone finally asked the questions that should have been asked years earlier. And that changed everything. This center exists for everyone still waiting to be seen, for every kid who's been told they don't matter, that they're a burden, that they're better off forgotten. You matter. You're seen, and you deserve more than the bare minimum of care from people who are supposed to love you. The billionaire stands in the back watching his grandson speak and feels something he hasn't felt since his daughter died. Pride. Not the pride of ownership or accomplishment, but the pride of witnessing someone transform pain into purpose. Daniel didn't just survive Margaret's cruelty. He decided to make sure other kids wouldn't have to. Later, on the rooftop of the billionaire's building, they stand together watching the sunset over the city. The same city where Daniel once slept in shelters and washed dishes for minimum wage. The same city that now holds a foundation bearing his mother's name and his determination to make things better. Do you think she ever regretted it? Daniel asks, meaning Margaret. The billionaire considers this. I don't know, but I regret not fighting harder, not questioning more, not trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. You're fighting now. So are you, and you're doing it better than I ever did. They stand in comfortable silence. Two people who should have known each other for a lifetime but are instead building something new from the ruins of what was stolen. It's not perfect. It's not what should have been. But it's real and it's theirs, and it's proof that even the deepest betrayals can't completely destroy the possibility of connection if someone's willing to do the work. Because here's the truth that matters more than any of the rest. Money wasn't what was stolen. Childhood was, trust was, time was. But healing begins the truth is seen. The moment someone decides that being invisible is no longer acceptable. The moment we start asking the hard questions about the children in our own communities who might be suffering behind closed doors while everyone assumes everything is fine. How many kids are waiting right now for someone to notice? How many Margarets are getting away with cruelty because no one's asking where the money really goes, where the child really is, whether the story they're being told actually makes sense? It is that. This story isn't just about one billionaire and one stolen childhood. It's about every child who deserves to be seen, to be protected, to be valued beyond what they can provide to the people meant to care for them. So here's my question for you. Who are you not seeing? What questions are you not asking? And what will you do about it? Drop a comment below telling me about a time when you or someone you knew fell through the cracks. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe because stories like this matter, and the more we talk about them, the harder it becomes for cruelty to hide behind closed doors and polite assumptions. Let's make sure the next Daniel gets found sooner. Let's make sure the next Margaret doesn't get 15 years to destroy a life. Because visibility isn't just about being seen. It's about someone caring enough to look.